At my older brother's birthday party, what should have been a celebration quickly turned into a nightmare when my entire family suddenly cornered me in front of all the guests. Instead of sharing laughter and cake, they began pressuring and demanding that I hand over my savings to help my brother, acting as though I had no right to say no and humiliating me publicly for refusing. Have you ever had a moment, a single shattering second, where you realized everything you thought you knew about your family was a lie? Where you faced down the very people who were supposed to love you most, only to find yourself betrayed, humiliated, and hit? My name is Meline, I'm 32 years old, and I still can't quite believe what happened at my brother Marcus's birthday party last month. My own mother demanded I give up my penthouse, the very symbol of my hard-fought independence, so my unemployed brother could finally live like a man. When I refused, she slapped me. And the rest of my family? They just watched. That night, something in me broke. And something else snapped into place. The penthouse. My sanctuary? I, Meline, a software engineer, had worked my entire life for it. It became the epicenter of a family storm I never, ever saw coming. I should have known something was off the moment I walked into my parents' house clutching Marcus's expensive gift. That familiar, unsettling mix of anticipation and judgment etched on everyone's faces, a look I'd known my entire life. Marcus, at 35, has always been the golden child, despite his perpetual unemployment. As I stepped inside, that familiar knot in my stomach tightened. You know, growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Portland, the pattern was set early. Marcus, the firstborn, the son my parents, Deborah and Harold, had always wanted. I came along 3 years later, the daughter they never quite seemed to know what to do with. Our childhood home was comfortable enough, small backyard, cramped bedrooms, but the emotional landscape. That was uneven terrain. Marcus could do no wrong in their eyes, despite all the evidence. When he broke the neighbor's window playing baseball indoors after being told 100 times not to, my father just chuckled, called it boys being boys. When Marcus brought home straight D's on his report card, my mother would sigh. School just isn't set up for creative minds like his. Meanwhile, I discovered computers in 4th grade. I found I had this natural talent, this understanding of how they worked. I'd stay after school, glued to the computer lab, fascinated by early programming. When I brought home straight A's, my mother would just nod. "That's nice, dear," she'd say, before her attention immediately swung back to whatever crisis Marcus was experiencing. By high school, the contrast was a chasm. I joined a robotics club, won a regional competition with my team. My parents? They didn't attend. Marcus had a football game that day, you see, even though he spent most of it warming the bench. When I came home with the trophy, my father glanced up from the TV. "Just don't get too wrapped up in that computer stuff," he warned. "Boys don't like girls who are too smart." College applications rolled around. I applied to 12 schools, got scholarships to 8. I chose State University, excellent computer science program. My parents contributed nothing to my education. "College is expensive, and we need to save for Marcus's future," my mother explained. So I worked 3 jobs. Morning shifts at a coffee shop, weekend retail, late nights doing data entry for a local business. Marcus, meanwhile, started at a private college. My parents footing the entire bill. He dropped out after the first semester, claiming the professors didn't understand his learning style. They just nodded sympathetically, then paid for his second attempt at a different school. He lasted slightly longer there, almost a full year, before deciding it wasn't the right environment. The third college? Same pattern. I graduated with honors, computer science, minors in math and business. My parents attended my graduation, but left early. Marcus had called, needing their help with a situation involving his landlord and overdue rent. My first job was entry-level at a small tech company, making barely enough to cover my student loans and a tiny studio apartment. I worked 60-hour weeks, taught myself additional programming languages at night, contributed to open-source projects to build my portfolio. During those years, Marcus lived at home, cycling through jobs that never lasted more than a few months. Retail positions he quit because the manager had it out for me. Restaurant jobs that ended because the hours didn't work with my creative schedule. Office positions terminated because the corporate environment was stifling my potential. Each failure was met with understanding, with endless excuses from my parents. "He just hasn't found his calling yet," my father would say. He's too bright for these menial jobs, my mother would add, as she did his laundry and cooked his meals. By age 28, I was visiting for holidays and occasional Sunday dinners, each time hearing about Marcus's latest venture that was sure to take off soon. The pattern was so predictable it would have been comical if it weren't so deeply frustrating. Then, when I was 26, I secured a position at Horizon Technologies, one of the leading software companies in Seattle. The salary jump allowed me to move to a better apartment, finally make headway on my student loans. I called my parents to share the news. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, distracted. "Did you hear? Marcus is thinking of starting his own business. He's got such an entrepreneurial spirit." The business turned out to be reselling limited edition sneakers online, funded by a loan from our parents that everyone knew would never be repaid. It lasted a grand total of 3 months before he moved on to his next passion project. My emotional distance from my family grew naturally, like a plant turning away from shade towards sunlight. I made friends at work, joined hiking groups, a book club. I built connections with people who actually celebrated my successes, rather than minimizing them. Rebecca became my closest friend after we met at a Women in Tech conference. She came from a truly supportive family, and she was initially shocked by the stories I shared about mine. "That's not normal, Maddie," she'd tell me. "You know that, right? Parents are supposed to be proud when their kids achieve something." I knew she was right, but years of conditioning had normalized the abnormal. I maintained contact with my family, but I protected my heart with lowered expectations. Marcus at 30. Marcus at 33. Was still living at home, still between jobs, still the absolute center of my parents' world, despite his consistent pattern of irresponsibility. Little did I know, my growing success would soon become the catalyst for the most painful family confrontation of my life. At 30, everything changed. I was promoted to senior software architect at Horizon Technologies, with a substantial salary increase and equity in the company. After years of careful saving and strategic career moves, I finally had the financial foundation to make my dream purchase, a penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle. This wasn't impulsive. I researched the market for months, consulted with financial advisors, made sure the investment aligned with my long-term goals. When I found the perfect place, a 2-bedroom penthouse on the 32nd floor of the Cascade building, I knew immediately it was meant to be mine. The views alone were worth the price tag, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Elliott Bay, the Space Needle, and on clear days, the majestic outline of Mount Rainier. The open-concept living area flowed into a gourmet kitchen with marble countertops and high-end appliances. The master suite featured a walk-in closet and a bathroom with a soaking tub positioned to enjoy the city lights. The second bedroom? I converted it into a home office, built-in bookshelves and a standing desk facing the water. Beyond the practical aspects, this penthouse represented something profound to me. It was tangible proof of everything I'd worked for. A space that was entirely mine, designed around my preferences, without compromise. After growing up in a home where my needs always came second, this was my sanctuary. The building amenities added another layer of luxury: a rooftop garden with grilling stations, a state-of-the-art fitness center, 24-hour concierge, a resident lounge perfect for an occasional work-from-home day when I wanted a change of scenery. Rebecca was the first person I showed the place to after I moved in. She brought champagne, and we toasted on the balcony as the sun set over the Olympic Mountains. "You earned every square inch of this place," she said, clinking her glass against mine. "I hope you never forget that." I felt a momentary pang, wishing my family could be as genuinely happy for me as my friend was. Still, I invited them to a housewarming dinner once I was settled, hoping, perhaps, that seeing my success might shift something in our dynamics. I spent all day preparing, cooking my mother's favorite salmon recipe, setting the table with new dinnerware I'd purchased for the occasion. I even bought my father's preferred scotch to serve, and made sure Marcus's favorite beer was chilling. They arrived 45 minutes late. My mother, Deborah, barely glanced at the carefully prepared table before commenting, "This building must have quite the homeowners association fee. Seems wasteful when you're just one person." My father, Harold, walked straight to the windows. "Pretty flashy place," he muttered. "Hope you're not overextended on this. The market could turn at any time." Marcus wandered through the space, opening cabinets and closet doors without asking, as if conducting an inspection. "Must be nice," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. Some people just get all the breaks. I bit my tongue and served dinner, trying to steer the conversation toward neutral topics. My mother spent most of the meal talking about Marcus's latest job interview that looked promising, and how the hiring manager would be lucky to get someone with his diverse experience. When I mentioned my recent promotion, my father nodded distractedly. Companies throw around fancy titles these days, he said. In my time, you had to work decades to get to a senior position. After dessert, as I was showing them the view from the balcony, Marcus said, So what's a place like this cost anyway? You must be making serious bank. Before I could deflect the inappropriate question, my mother added, Yes, Meline. It does make us wonder if you're being wise with your money. You know, family should come before material possessions. The implication hung heavy in the air, but no one made it explicit that night. They left shortly after, my mother taking barely a bite of the dessert I'd spent hours preparing. Rebecca called the next morning to ask how it went. When I recounted the evening, she sighed. Classic. They can't celebrate you because it highlights the fact that Marcus is a grown man still living like a teenager. It's not about you, Maddie, it's about them not wanting to face reality. The following Sunday dinner at my parents' house was even more uncomfortable. My mother mentioned that Marcus was between opportunities again and gave me a pointed look. It's so hard for him, seeing his little sister with such a fancy place when he can barely afford his car payment. My father added, Family is supposed to look out for each other, Meline. Remember that. These comments escalated over the following months. Each family gathering featured some new variation on the theme that my success was somehow an insult to Marcus, and that I owed it to the family to share my blessings. At Thanksgiving, my Aunt Judith asked, in front of everyone, Wouldn't you be lonely in that big penthouse all by yourself, Meline? I'm sure Marcus would appreciate having a nice place to stay while he's figuring things out. At Christmas, my Uncle Thomas cornered me in the kitchen. You know your brother really needs a break. A man needs his own space to feel respected. Have you thought about letting him stay with you for a while? You've got that spare room after all. I deflected these suggestions as diplomatically as possible, but the pressure was building. Meanwhile, Marcus became increasingly entitled, making comments about checking out my view, or testing that fancy shower, whenever the penthouse was mentioned. The situation reached a breaking point when I hosted a small dinner party for colleagues and invited Rebecca. My parents called that afternoon, asking if they could stop by to drop something off. Against my better judgment, I agreed. They arrived with Marcus in tow, clearly intending to stay. My mother immediately began critiquing my appetizer arrangement in front of my boss and coworkers, while Marcus helped himself to the wine I'd carefully selected for the evening. My sister likes to play hostess in her fancy apartment, he announced to Emma, one of my colleagues. But she forgets where she came from. I managed to get through the evening without causing a scene, but once everyone left, I confronted them. That was completely inappropriate. You can't just show up uninvited to an event I'm hosting for work. My mother looked wounded. We're family, Meline. Family doesn't need invitations. Besides, Marcus added with a smirk, it's not like you don't have the space. I realized then that the boundary violations would continue unless I took a firm stand. I began declining Sunday dinners more frequently, citing work commitments. I stopped sharing details about my life during our phone calls. I created distance to protect my hard-earned peace. But the family tension was building toward a confrontation that would change everything. And Marcus's upcoming 30th birthday party would prove to be the breaking point none of us saw coming. 3 weeks before Marcus's birthday, he lost his job again. This time it was a position at his friend's father's insurance company, a job practically handed to him on a silver platter. He lasted all of 2 months before being let go for inconsistent performance and attendance issues, though my parents insisted it was because the manager was threatened by Marcus's natural leadership qualities. The day after he was fired, my mother called me. Meline, your brother is going through a rough patch again, she began, her voice carrying that familiar note of expectation. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, already knowing where this was heading. Well, he has that car payment coming up, and with his birthday next month, I was wondering if you could help out. Just until he finds something new. You know how hard the job market is these days. I'd heard this exact speech so many times I could have recited it with her. Against my better judgment, I sent Marcus $300 for his car payment, telling myself it was a one-time thing. 3 days later, my father called. Your brother's rent is due, and you know how these landlords can be. No compassion for a temporary setback. Could you spot him just this once? Another $1,200 transferred from my account to Marcus's. I told myself it was the last time, but the requests kept coming. Grocery money. Utilities. A new suit for interviews. Each request framed as temporary essential, and my familial duty. By the time Marcus's birthday approached, I'd given him nearly $3,000 in loans that we all knew would never be repaid. During a lunch break at work, I confided in my colleague Emma about the situation. It's like I'm being punished for being responsible, I told her, as we sat in the company cafeteria. The more I achieve, the more they expect me to compensate for Marcus's failures. Emma, who came from a large family with healthy dynamics, shook her head. You need to set boundaries, Maddie. Clear, firm boundaries. Otherwise, this pattern will continue until you have nothing left to give. But their family, I said, repeating the refrain that had been programmed into me since childhood. Family supports each other's growth, Emma replied. They don't sabotage it. What they're doing isn't love, it's enabling your brother and exploiting you. I knew she was right, but years of conditioning made the prospect of confrontation terrifying. Still, I resolved to begin setting limits after Marcus's birthday had passed. No need to create drama during a family celebration, I reasoned. The weekend before the party, I went shopping for Marcus's gift. Despite my frustration, some part of me still hoped that a thoughtful present might somehow bridge the growing chasm between us. I selected an expensive watch, far more than I should have spent given the recent loans, but I wanted to make a gesture that couldn't be criticized. That evening, my phone buzzed continuously with messages from various family members. From my mother. Don't forget Marcus's favorite chocolate cake and wear something nice, your Aunt Judith is coming from Portland. From my father. Make sure you're on time for once, this is important to your mother. From my cousin Stephanie. Looking forward to seeing you at the party, we need to catch up. From my Uncle Thomas. Will be good to see the whole family together, we miss you at Sunday dinners. The subtext was clear, attendance was mandatory, and my absence had been noted and discussed. The family system was exerting its pull, trying to bring the wayward member back into the fold. The morning of the party, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a conservative blue dress that wouldn't invite comments about showing off, or dressing fancy. I styled my hair in a simple way, applied minimal makeup, and deliberately left most of my jewelry at home. These calculations, this careful curation of my appearance to minimize criticism, spoke volumes about the unhealthy dynamics I was navigating. As I wrapped Marcus's gift in silver paper, I rehearsed neutral responses to the inevitable questions about my job, my penthouse, my love life. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 40 minutes. With each mile, I felt myself regressing, the confident professional replaced by the perpetual, second-best, child seeking approval that never came. I parked between my uncle's SUV and my cousin's sedan, taking a moment to center myself before heading inside. The house was already full when I arrived. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and my parents' friends, all gathered to celebrate Marcus. Balloons decorated the living room, and a "Happy 30th birthday" banner hung across the dining room entrance. My mother intercepted me at the door. Finally, you're here, she said, though I was precisely on time. Put your gift on the table with the others. Marcus is in the backyard with your father and Uncle Thomas. I made my way through the house, exchanging greetings with relatives I hadn't seen in months. Most were polite but distant, as if unsure how to relate to me now that I'd broken the unspoken family rules by becoming too successful. Aunt Judith caught my arm as I passed. That penthouse still treating you well? She asked, her tone suggesting I was somehow betraying my upbringing by living there. It's perfect for me, I replied simply, disengaging before she could press further. In the kitchen, I overheard my mother's friend Patricia saying, "Think she's better than the rest of us now, with her fancy job and expensive apartment. Meanwhile, poor Marcus can't catch a break." I pretended not to hear, focusing instead on arranging the vegetable tray I'd brought. The pattern was familiar, my accomplishments framed as arrogance, Marcus's failures as bad luck. The backyard was set up with tables and chairs for dinner. Marcus stood with a beer in hand, holding court with our father, uncle, and 2 male cousins. He acknowledged my arrival with a brief nod before continuing his story about how his former boss couldn't handle someone with real ideas. As I took a seat at the periphery of the gathering, I couldn't help but marvel at the parallel realities we inhabited. In Marcus's version, eagerly reinforced by our parents, he was a misunderstood genius, repeatedly victimized by circumstances and jealous authority figures. In the version supported by objective evidence, he was a chronically underperforming adult enabled by parents who couldn't bear to see him face consequences. Little did I know that in just a few hours, these competing narratives would collide in a way that would permanently alter our family landscape. The birthday cake, the presents, the seemingly normal family dinner, all of it was prelude to a confrontation that had been brewing for years. Dinner was served at 6 o'clock, with everyone gathered around the extended dining table and a folding table set up to accommodate the overflow. My mother had prepared all of Marcus's favorites: roast beef, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and rolls from the bakery down the street. I was seated between cousin Stephanie and my father's coworker Jim, safely distant from Marcus at the head of the table. The conversation flowed around me, largely focused on Marcus's recent bad luck with employment. "The problem with companies today is they don't recognize real talent," my father announced, carving another slice of roast beef for Marcus. "They want conformists, not innovators." "Exactly," Marcus agreed, already on his fourth beer. "That insurance job was soul-crushing anyway. I've got bigger plans." "What sort of plans?" I asked, genuinely curious if he had developed any realistic goals. The table fell momentarily silent, as if my question itself was an act of aggression. Marcus recovered quickly. "I'm exploring several opportunities," he said vaguely. "High-level stuff." My mother jumped in. "Marcus has always had an entrepreneurial spirit. He just needs the right platform to showcase his abilities." I nodded and returned to my meal, the familiar script playing out exactly as expected. No one asked about my work or life. My role at these gatherings was audience, not participant. After dinner came cake, the chocolate mousse from Marcus's favorite bakery that cost my mother nearly $100, and then presents. Marcus opened each gift with the entitlement of someone who expected nothing less, offering perfunctory thanks before moving to the next box. When he opened my gift, the expensive watch I'd chosen carefully based on a style he'd once admired, he barely glanced at it before setting it aside with a brief, "Thanks, sis." My mother, noticing his tepid response, quickly added, "Isn't that thoughtful of your sister, Marcus? She knows how much you appreciate quality timepieces." The gift opening concluded, and I thought the evening was winding down. I was already calculating when I could politely leave without comment, when my father stood and tapped his glass with a spoon. "If I could have everyone's attention," he said, his voice carrying across the now quiet room. "We have something important to discuss as a family." A chill ran through me. Something in his tone set off warning bells. "As you all know, Marcus has had some setbacks recently," my father continued. "Despite his talents and abilities, he's struggling to find his footing in today's competitive job market." Murmurs of sympathy circulated through the room. "At 35, a man needs his own space, his own domain where he can regroup and plan his next moves," my father went on. "Unfortunately, with the current housing costs and Marcus's temporary financial situation, that's been difficult." My stomach tightened as I began to see where this was heading. My mother stood up beside my father. "Family means supporting each other through difficult times," she said, her eyes finding mine across the room. "Those who have been blessed with abundance have a special responsibility to share with those in need. Especially family." The room had become uncomfortably quiet, all eyes now shifting between my parents and me. Uncle Thomas cleared his throat. "Meline, we've all been talking, and we think there's an obvious solution here." His tone was reasonable, as if proposing a simple business transaction. "You've got that big penthouse all to yourself, with the spare bedroom you use as an office. Marcus needs a place to stay while he gets back on his feet." I blinked, stunned by the directness of the proposition, despite having sensed it coming. "You want me to let Marcus move into my penthouse? It makes perfect sense." Aunt Judith chimed in. "You're rarely home with your work schedule, and Marcus needs a prestigious address for job applications. It would just be temporary, until he finds his feet," my father added. Marcus sat back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd known about this ambush all along. "I've put a lot of thought into this," he said, as if he'd been the one to come up with the idea. "It's the perfect solution. I'd take good care of the place, and you'd barely notice me there." I took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. My penthouse is my home, I said carefully. I worked very hard for it. It's not an extra property I have lying around. It's where I live. You can still live there, my mother said dismissively. You'd just be sharing it with your brother, who needs help. That's what family does. Besides, my father added, it's not like you had to struggle the way Marcus has. Everything's always come easily to you. The injustice of that statement momentarily robbed me of speech. I had worked multiple jobs through college while my parents paid Marcus's tuition at 3 different schools. I had saved for years while living in tiny apartments to afford the down payment on my home. Nothing had been handed to me. Quite the opposite. I'm sorry, I said, finding my voice, but that's not going to work for me. My home is my private space, and I need it to remain that way. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. So you're refusing to help your brother? My mother asked, her voice rising. After everything we've done for you? I've helped Marcus repeatedly, I replied, fighting to keep my tone even. I've given him thousands of dollars just in the last month. But moving him into my home is a boundary I'm not willing to cross. Boundaries? My father scoffed. This isn't therapy, Meline, this is family. There are no boundaries in family. There should be, I countered. Healthy relationships require respect for each other's space and choices. Uncle Thomas leaned forward. Listen, Meline, no one's asking you to give up your penthouse, just to share it until Marcus gets on his feet. 6 months tops. We all know it would never be 6 months, I said, the words escaping before I could filter them. And it's not just about time. It's about respect for the choices I've made and the life I've built. Marcus's face darkened. So your fancy apartment is more important than helping your own brother? Nice to know where your priorities lie, sis. My priority is maintaining the home I worked for years to afford, I replied. I'm happy to help you in other ways, Marcus, but not by giving up my personal space. You're being selfish and unreasonable, my mother snapped. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By refusing to help your brother when he needs it most? The gaslighting was so blatant it would have been comical in any other context. What exactly had they done for me beyond providing basic necessities in childhood? Every step of my adult life had been navigated without their support, financial or otherwise. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, rising from my seat. But my answer is no. Marcus is welcome to stay here with you, as he has been, or I can help him find an apartment within his budget. But he will not be moving into my home. What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to react. My mother crossed the room in 3 quick strides and slapped me hard across the face. The crack of it echoed in the sudden silence. Ungrateful, selfish girl, she hissed, her face contorted with rage. After everything we've done for you! I stood frozen, my cheek burning, as I looked around the room. No one moved to intervene. No one spoke in my defense. Some looked away uncomfortably, but others, including my father and Marcus, wore expressions suggesting they believed I deserved it. In that crystallizing moment, I saw my family with perfect clarity for perhaps the first time. This wasn't love. It wasn't even family in any meaningful sense of the word. It was a system of control and exploitation that I had participated in for far too long. Without another word, I picked up my purse and walked out, closing the door quietly behind me. The drive home passed in a blur. My cheek still stung from my mother's slap, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the emotional impact of what had just occurred. I had been publicly humiliated, assaulted, and abandoned by every family member present, all because I refused to surrender my home to a 35-year-old man who had never taken responsibility for himself. As I pulled into my building's garage, the tears I'd been holding back finally broke free. I sat in my car, sobbing uncontrollably, grateful for the privacy of the underground parking level. The security guard, Carl, noticed me as he made his rounds and approached with concern. "Miss Williams, are you all right?" he asked, keeping a respectful distance. I quickly wiped my eyes. "I'm fine, just a difficult family situation. Thank you for checking." "No problem. Let me know if you need anything," he replied kindly before continuing his patrol. Inside my penthouse, my sanctuary that my family had tried to claim, I collapsed on the sofa, the beautiful nighttime view of Seattle a stark contrast to the ugliness I just experienced. I called Rebecca, needing to process what had happened with someone who actually cared about my well-being. "Maddie, what's wrong?" she answered, immediately picking up on the distress in my voice. They ambushed me, I managed before breaking down again. Between sobs, I recounted the evening's events, culminating in my mother's slap and the family's silent complicity. Oh my God, Maddie! Rebecca gasped. That's assault! Your own mother hit you in front of everyone, and nobody did anything? Nobody, I confirmed. They all just watched. I think some of them were glad she did it. That's beyond dysfunctional, Rebecca said firmly. That's abusive. You know that, right? What they did, what they've been doing is abusive. Hearing the words spoken aloud was both shocking and clarifying. Abuse. I'd always thought of my family as difficult, dysfunctional, frustrating, but had avoided labeling their behavior as abusive. Yet what else could you call a mother slapping her adult daughter for refusing to give up her home? I don't know what to do now, I admitted. Do I just never speak to them again? You don't have to make any permanent decisions tonight, Rebecca said gently. Right now, focus on taking care of yourself. Tomorrow, we can talk about next steps. Do you want me to come over? No, it's late. I'll be okay. I just needed to tell someone who wouldn't think I deserved it. You absolutely did not deserve it, Maddie. No one deserves to be treated that way. Especially by family. After we hung up, I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the evening's events. As I was getting ready for bed, my phone began buzzing with messages. From my father. Your mother is very upset. You need to apologize for causing a scene at your brother's birthday. From Aunt Judith. Family disagreements should stay private. Walking out like that was very immature. From Uncle Thomas. You've broken your mother's heart with your selfishness. Family has to come first. From Marcus. Way to make my birthday all about you. Typical. The gaslighting was so extreme it was almost laughable. I had been ambushed, publicly pressured, and physically assaulted, yet somehow I was the villain for walking away. I silenced my phone and tried to sleep, though rest proved elusive. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My boss, understanding that I never took time off without good reason, told me to take care of myself and keep her updated. I spent the day alternating between periods of cathartic crying and moments of startling clarity about my family dynamics. By afternoon, the messages had escalated. From my mother. I raised you better than this. After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? By breaking my heart and abandoning your brother in his time of need. From my father. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Is your precious penthouse worth destroying this family for? From Marcus. Mom and Dad are devastated. Hope you're happy in your ivory tower. Then, a call came through from the concierge, Carl. Miss Williams, there are 2 people in the lobby claiming to be a nurse. They're quite insistent about seeing you. Should I send them up? My heart raced. Absolutely not. I don't want to see them. Please ask them to leave. Of course. Would you like me to call security if they refuse? Yes, please. And Carl, could you make a note that they're not to be allowed up under any circumstances? Already done, Miss Williams. Don't worry. I watched through my peephole 20 minutes later as Carl escorted my parents back to the elevator, my father's face red with anger, my mother dabbing at theatrical tears with a tissue. The boundary violation was breathtaking. Showing up unannounced at my home after what had happened, expecting to be welcomed. The next day, I returned to work, needing the normalcy of my professional environment. Around lunchtime, Emma texted me. Your brother is in the lobby asking for you. Security wants to know if they should let him up. My hand shook as I replied. Absolutely not. I don't want to see him. 5 minutes later, Emma appeared at my office door. He's making a scene downstairs, saying it's a family emergency. Security's handling it, but I thought you should know. I called building security and authorized them to escort Marcus from the premises and ban him from returning. The humiliation of having my family drama spill into my workplace was excruciating. That evening, I discovered Marcus had posted on social media. Some people forget where they came from once they get a little success. Sad when your own sister values material possessions over family. #family first #disappointed. The post had comments from various relatives and family friends, all expressing sympathy for poor Marcus, and disappointment in me. The public shaming was clearly intended to pressure me into compliance through embarrassment. Instead, it hardened my resolve. I blocked Marcus on all platforms, then did the same with every family member who had commented in support of his post. The relief was immediate, like closing windows during a storm. The next escalation came in the form of a certified letter from a law firm I'd never heard of, claiming I had made legally binding verbal commitments to provide housing for Marcus. The letter demanded I honor these commitments immediately or face legal action. I almost laughed out loud at the absurdity. I had made no such commitments, verbal or otherwise. Still, the implied threat was clear: submit to family demands or face continued harassment. It was time to take more decisive action to protect myself. My family had shown they would not respect my boundaries voluntarily. I would need to enforce them with whatever means necessary. The morning after receiving the ridiculous legal threat, I called Dr. Mitchell, a therapist I'd seen briefly a few years earlier for work-related stress. She fit me in that afternoon, and I arrived at her comfortable office clutching the threatening letter like evidence at a trial. "I'm not sure if you remember me," I began. "Of course I do, Meline," she replied warmly. "What brings you back after all this time?" I handed her the letter and gave her a condensed version of recent events, from the increasing pressure about my penthouse to the birthday party ambush and its aftermath. Dr. Mitchell read the letter carefully, her expression growing more concerned. When she looked up, her eyes were compassionate but direct. "This is textbook emotional abuse and manipulation," she said without hesitation. "The physical assault, and yes, your mother slapping you is assault, takes it to another level entirely. I keep thinking I must be overreacting," I admitted. "They're my family, shouldn't I be more understanding of their concerns? What you're experiencing is the result of lifelong conditioning," Dr. Mitchell explained. "You've been programmed to put your family's wants, particularly your brother's, above your own legitimate needs. That's not normal or healthy family behavior." Over the next hour, we dissected patterns I'd normalized for decades: the golden child/scapegoat dynamic between Marcus and me, the parentification that made me responsible for my brother's well-being, the emotional manipulation tactics my parents employed. "What you're describing isn't just dysfunctional, it's a textbook case of a narcissistic family system," Dr. Mitchell explained. "Your brother is the golden child, you as the scapegoat who can never do enough, your parents as the enforcers of this unhealthy dynamic." Something clicked into place hearing her professional assessment. This wasn't just my perception or oversensitivity. These were recognized patterns of dysfunction that had names and treatment approaches. "So what do I do now?" I asked. "First, recognize that you cannot change them," she said firmly. "Your parents and brother have benefited from this dynamic for decades. They have no motivation to change it. And second, protect yourself. Set clear boundaries and enforce them consistently. Consider a period of no contact to give yourself space to heal and gain perspective." As I left her office, I felt lighter than I had in days. The validation from a professional that I wasn't crazy or selfish was profoundly healing. That evening I began researching family dynamics and narcissistic family systems. The literature described my experience with such accuracy it was unsettling, like reading a case study about my own life. I found online support groups for adult children of narcissistic parents, and spent hours reading stories disturbingly similar to mine. The next day, I contacted a security consultant recommended by my company and had additional measures installed at my penthouse: a doorbell camera, enhanced locks, and a security protocol with my building's front desk. I wasn't taking any chances after Marcus's attempt to enter my workplace. I also consulted Jessica, a lawyer friend, about the threatening letter. "This is laughable," she said after reviewing it. "There's no legal basis whatsoever. It's a scare tactic, nothing more." "Should I respond?" I asked. "Actually, yes," Jessica said. "I'll draft a cease and desist letter making it clear that any further harassment, legal threats, showing up at your home or workplace, public defamation on social media, will result in you pursuing legal remedies, including a restraining order if necessary." The formal response felt empowering. I was no longer simply reacting to their attacks but taking proactive steps to protect myself. A few days later, I received a text from my cousin Stephanie. "Can we talk? Not everyone in the family agrees with what happened." We met at a coffee shop far from my apartment and workplace. Stephanie had always been somewhat of an outsider in the family herself, the artistic one who chose theater over the business career her parents had planned for her. "What happened at the party was wrong," she said immediately. "I should have said something, and I'm sorry I didn't." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by her acknowledgement. It means a lot to hear that. I've been where you are. She continued. When I chose theater school instead of business college, my parents cut me off financially. Your mom, my Aunt Deborah, told them they were right to do it, that I needed to learn my lesson. But Uncle Harold secretly sent me money for books and supplies. My dad did that. I was stunned. My father had always seemed completely aligned with my mother's treatment of me. He's more complex than he appears, Stephanie said. But he's weak. He won't stand up to your mother or admit Marcus needs real help, not enabling. Our conversation continued for hours as we shared experiences of being family outcasts. Stephanie had eventually established boundaries with her parents, and now had a relationship with them that, while not perfect, was at least manageable. Distance helped, she advised. I moved to Portland, limited contact to scheduled calls and visits, and refused to discuss certain topics. It was hard at first, but now they mostly respect my boundaries. Back at home, I felt less alone, knowing at least one family member understood and supported me. That small validation gave me strength for what I needed to do next. Over the following weeks, I systematically gathered evidence of my journey versus Marcus's. I created a timeline documenting my education, paid for entirely by me, my career progression, my financial milestones, and my consistent self-sufficiency. Alongside it, I documented Marcus's history of dropped college courses paid by our parents, failed jobs, loans never repaid, and continued dependence. I wasn't creating this record to shame him, but to have concrete evidence against the gaslighting narrative that I had somehow had it easy while Marcus struggled through no fault of his own. During this time, Marcus attempted to enter my building twice more. The second time, he told the concierge he was my brother and had left his key upstairs. Thanks to my new security protocols, he was turned away and warned that police would be called if he returned. The cease and desist letter from my lawyer had an impact. The social media campaign against me quieted, and no more legal threats arrived. Still, I received occasional texts from relatives asking why I was tearing the family apart, or urging me to be the bigger person. These messages no longer rattled me as they once would have. With Dr. Mitchell's help, I had developed tools to recognize manipulation tactics and respond appropriately, which sometimes meant not responding at all. 6 weeks after the birthday party incident, I felt strong enough to take the final step in reclaiming my power. I arranged a meeting with my parents and Marcus at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant downtown, with the reassurance that security was nearby if needed. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either begin a healing process or finalize our estrangement. Either way, I was prepared to face my family on my terms, with truth as my shield and boundaries as my armor. I arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes early, needing time to center myself before the confrontation. The private dining room I'd reserved offered both privacy and safety. My lawyer, Jessica, had suggested a public venue with staff nearby, just in case emotions escalated again. I'd prepared meticulously for this meeting, bringing copies of the documentation I'd compiled and rehearsing what I wanted to say with Dr. Mitchell. Most importantly, I'd clarified my boundaries and the consequences for violating them. My parents arrived exactly on time, my mother's expression a practiced mask of wounded dignity, my father looking uncomfortable but resolute. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late, making an entrance as if his tardiness was a power move rather than simple disrespect. "Thank you for coming," I began, once a server had brought water and left us alone. "I wanted to meet in person to clarify some things about our relationship going forward." "Going forward?" My mother interrupted. "Perhaps you should start with an apology for walking out on your brother's birthday and ignoring our calls for weeks." I took a deep breath, refusing to be derailed. What happened at Marcus's birthday party was unacceptable. You ambushed me with unreasonable demands, and when I refused, you physically assaulted me, Mom. No one intervened or checked if I was okay afterward. "It was just a slap," Marcus said dismissively. "Don't be so dramatic. If a stranger had slapped me, it would be assault. Being family doesn't make it acceptable," I replied calmly. "But today isn't about rehashing what happened. It's about establishing clear boundaries for the future." I opened my folder and placed 3 copies of a document on the table. This is a timeline I've created documenting my journey from college to present day. It includes every job I worked to pay for my education, every apartment I lived in while saving for my home, every promotion I earned through hard work and additional skill development on my own time. My father glanced at the document, while my mother pushed it away without looking. Alongside my journey, I've documented Marcus's path, the 3 colleges our parents paid for, the numerous jobs left or lost, the repeated financial support provided with no expectation of repayment or responsibility. This is ridiculous. Marcus snapped. You're just trying to make yourself look good and me look bad. No. I'm establishing facts to counter the narrative that I've somehow had it easy while you've struggled through no fault of your own. That narrative has been used to justify increasingly unreasonable demands, culminating in the expectation that I should give up my home to accommodate you. My mother's face had flushed with anger. We never asked you to give up your home, just to share it temporarily. A distinction without a difference. I replied. My home is my private space, earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. No one has the right to demand access to it, family or otherwise. So what is this meeting about? My father asked, speaking for the first time. Just to show us how much better you think you are? No, it's to establish clear boundaries going forward. I placed another document on the table. These are my terms for continuing a relationship with each of you. The document was simple and direct. No further requests for financial support for Marcus. No discussion of my penthouse or suggestions about Marcus living there. Respectful communication only, no verbal abuse, physical aggression, or manipulation. No unannounced visits to my home or workplace. Acknowledgement of past behavior and commitment to respect these boundaries. If these boundaries are respected, we can begin rebuilding our relationship slowly, starting with occasional phone calls and working toward brief public meetings. If they are violated, I will immediately end contact for a period of at least 6 months. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. Marcus scoffed audibly. My father looked troubled but not entirely surprised. This is absurd, my mother finally said. We're your family. You don't get to dictate terms for loving us. I'm not dictating terms for love. I clarified. I'm establishing requirements for maintaining contact. There's a difference. So it's your way or nothing? Marcus challenged. It's healthy boundaries or nothing. I corrected. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable, just basic respect and acknowledgement of my autonomy. And if we refuse to sign this contract? My mother asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Then we have no relationship until you're ready to respect these boundaries. I said simply. The choice is yours. What followed was exactly what Dr. Mitchell had prepared me for, a tantrum of epic proportions. My mother cried. My father appealed to family loyalty. And Marcus alternated between sullen silence and outbursts about my superiority complex. When emotional manipulation failed to move me, my mother switched tactics. If you do this, if you cut us off, don't expect to ever be welcomed back, she threatened. You'll regret throwing away your family over your selfish pride. It was the moment of truth, the ultimatum I'd anticipated. In the past, such a threat would have immediately brought me back in line, terrified of losing the only family I had, however dysfunctional. But something had fundamentally shifted in me. I realized with perfect clarity that what I was being offered wasn't really family at all. It was a system of control masked as kinship, a bargain where love was conditional on compliance. I hope it doesn't come to that, I said, gathering my documents and standing up. But I deserve to be treated with respect, and I won't accept less. Even from family. Especially from family. The ball is in your court now. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, uncertain if I would ever speak to my parents or brother again, but absolutely certain I had done the right thing for myself. The following weeks were difficult but clarifying. My parents didn't contact me, clearly expecting me to break first and come crawling back, as I always had before. Marcus resumed his social media campaign briefly, before his attention was diverted by some new grievance. I channeled my energy into building stronger connections with people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Rebecca and Emma became even closer friends, and I expanded my circle through a book club and a hiking group. I reconnected with Stephanie, who provided occasional updates on family matters without pressure or judgment. Most importantly, I continued my work with Dr. Mitchell, processing the grief of family estrangement and building a healthier self-image not defined by my role as the family scapegoat. For months after our meeting, I received an unexpected email from my father, sent from his personal account rather than the one my mother monitored. Meline. It began simply. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our meeting. While I don't agree with everything you said, I can see that I, haven't always treated you fairly. Your mother isn't ready to acknowledge this, and Marcus certainly isn't, but I wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished, and I respect the strength it took to stand up for yourself. If you're willing, I'd like to talk sometime, just the two of us. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement, but it was a start. I agreed to meet him for coffee the following week, with cautious optimism but firm boundaries intact. Around the same time, something shifted for Marcus as well. Though not because of any great epiphany about our relationship. With his primary enablers, our parents, finally running out of patience and resources, and his secondary support, me, firmly unavailable, he finally had to face reality. He took an entry-level position at a local retail store and moved into a modest apartment with a roommate. 6 months after the confrontation, I hosted a small dinner party in my penthouse for my chosen family, friends who supported me unconditionally and respected my boundaries without question. As we